Well, welcome everybody. This is our second meeting with witnesses of our subcommittee of sport-related concussions. And in our first meeting, our inaugural meeting, we heard from the Honourable Ken Dryden, who wrote a book called Game Change on concussions. We also had the opportunity to hear from some very courageous witnesses that shared their stories about living with concussion and what that's meant to themselves and also to their parents and their families. And the members had excellent questions, and I'm sure we will have excellent questions today. Members come from all parts of Canada, from rural and urban ridings, and want to really hear from the witnesses so that we can get a clear perspective of what it's like to live with concussion, through concussion, and how we can improve the opportunity to have safer playing fields for our athletes. So on that behalf, I also want to bring up that these committee hearings, we want to make sure that parents with minor children understand that these meetings are being televised, that media can be broadcast, and part of or the entirety of this meeting, and the names of the children will be published in the House of Commons publications. Do we have the consent of parents for that? Okay, I'm seeing a nod and a yes. Thank you very much. So without further delay, I'll now give the floor to Kathy. And we're starting with, okay, so we'll be starting with those that are on video conference, just in case we lose the feed. We want to ensure that we can get their testimony in, and that is Carter and Ann Fair, whom we have on video conference, and they're coming from two different locations. Well, Ms. Fair, the floor is yours.
Thanks. I'm not 100% sure about when the very first one occurred, but I know that over the last 3 years, my son Carter has been diagnosed with a concussion no fewer than 6 times, all while playing junior hockey. His symptoms have been varied, some short-lived, some longer-lasting, some mild, some severe, all of them worrisome for his father and me. Perhaps the most worrisome are the ones which were not diagnosed by a doctor or a trainer. I have no idea how many that could be, but looking back, there were signs. The word concussion simply never came to mind. That is why I'm honored to be a witness to your committee on concussions in sport. I hope to encourage our federal government to pass legislation similar to Rowan's Law, which was recently passed in Ontario. In reading about Rowan's Law and how it came about, I learned that Rowan Stringer had suspected she had sustained a concussion prior to the game, which ended her life. She had, in fact, read about concussions online shortly before her death. My son is a goalie and moved away from home to play hockey for his 15-year-old year. For much of the next 2 seasons, he complained about headaches, but to me, that is all they were, headaches. We had always tried to buy him the best equipment, mask included. His was top of the line with an NHL grade sticker on it, and it cost $1,000. I believed he was protected. After all, it cost $1,000. But the complaints kept coming. He would take a shot off the mask in practice and get a headache. We were not aware enough to put 2 and 2 together. Other players on his team were diagnosed with concussions and would have to sit out a couple days or weeks. Never Carter. He was the goalie and the best protected. How could he get hurt? In the fall of 2015, his 17-year-old year, Carter was playing with the Edmonton Oil Kings in an exhibition game. He'd been given a mask painted in team colors to use that night. I sent a picture of it to you to show you. I have it here in case you didn't receive it. He wasn't allowed to practice in it, and he couldn't see, so he had to flip it up. But he's a quiet kid, so rather than say something to a team official, he simply pushed it up on his head a bit in order to see through the bars. Soon after coming into the game, he was hit in the mask with a shot. He had a headache after the game, but thinking that if he reported his headache, he'd be cut and sent back to his junior A team, he didn't say anything to the trainer. Later in the week, he was using his own mask at practice and was hit in the mask again. The next thing he remembers was coming to on the bench. This would be his first diagnosed concussion. For the rest of that season, he played without incident, with the same model mask he had used since he was 14. In the fall of his 18-year-old year, he was practicing with the Kamloops Blazers on a road trip. A puck struck him in the head, and he was diagnosed with his second concussion. He then had to endure 3 days of bus travel, making his symptoms worse. This time, the trainer looked at his mask and told him he should not have been using it at a level higher than bantam. I was sick. My job as a mother is to protect my children, and I didn't know enough about goalie masks to make sure that he was wearing one that would do the job. I believed that the $1,000 price tag was evidence that this helmet would be adequate. Not true. When Carter was cleared to play again, word was out. Hit him in the head and he'll miss a couple weeks. That happened 3 times before the end of the year, and opponents were suspended by the league for 3, 7, and 8 games for separate incidents. Keep in mind, you don't get suspended for hitting a goalie in the mask with a puck, but you do get suspended for body checking his head into his post, recklessly body checking him after he deflects your shot to the corner, or for skating full speed from your own blue line and putting your knee into the side of his head after he's covered the puck. After the last of those 3, it was almost 4 months before he could work out again. He required reading glasses as he'd lost some of his vision. He had headaches every day, poor concentration, he couldn't sleep, and he was unable to do many of the activities that he loved, like golf. Carter was stubborn and determined, though. He talked us into letting him play again, and after a stellar start to his 19-year-old year and winning Goalie of the Month honors, he was playing in a game against the same team that had ended his previous season. Less than 2 months into the schedule, a second consecutive season ended with a knee to the head. This time, 2 suspensions, 6 games for the player and 3 for the coach, who, according to one of his former players, had a hit list of players upon whom he encouraged his team to take extra liberties. Do not think for a second that we don't understand and accept that concussions are a part of contact sports such as hockey. They are going to happen. My biggest issue is that there are so many people who know so little about concussions and in turn have, at times, seemed to encourage a lack of respect for the health of opposing athletes. These players, and sometimes their coaches, are willing to cause concussions intentionally in order to gain an advantage for their team. Therefore, it is my opinion that anyone who coaches a sport where violent collisions occur should have, as a minimum, mandatory part of their coaching training, an in-depth tutorial taken repeatedly as new information becomes available. That tutorial needs to include recognition, prevention, treatment, and possible future effects of concussions. This is a topic that must not be glossed over. Concussions need to be made as ugly as possible so that coaches will instill in their players respect for their opponent's health. This brings me to my next point, respect for opponents. Too many times in an arena, I hear bigger cheers for body checks than I hear for pretty goals or great saves. What message does a young player receive when highlight packages on TV show hits that cause injuries? The message is that if you can't get noticed for your skill, you can still get noticed if you cause some damage. This makes it extremely important for coaches to put a tremendous emphasis on skill development and team play, while holding accountable players who look to take advantage of those who may be smaller or in a vulnerable position. The coach's message needs to override the big cheers and TV highlights. Failing that, teams need to hold their coaches responsible for their players' actions. While leagues do hand out suspensions, they're not seen as a deterrent. They need to make stricter rules to hold those players and coaches accountable. I think they need to include suspensions or fines to the team, the coach, and the player when these serious safety rules are violated. The penalties must be stiff enough to bring about an actual change. The Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League handed out suspensions, but it wasn't enough to change the behavior, as Carter received 4 diagnosed concussions from illegal hits in 5 months of play, despite the suspensions being handed out. Finally, there needs to be an equipment standard that is known to buyers and checked by team officials. As a parent, we go to the store and get recommendations from a salesman. We have to trust their educated or uneducated advice. There needs to be a comprehensive list of safety requirements for helmets that's readily available at stores and with the team trainers at all levels, especially at levels where collisions become more violent due to size, strength, and speed. The helmets should be inspected for safety before an athlete is allowed to play. In Carter's situation, the Edmonton Oil Kings, who have a paid trainer and equipment manager, should have told us about his inadequate helmet when he was drafted at the age of 14. Not only did they fail to inspect his helmet, but they gave him an improperly fitting helmet to wear during games. Money seems to be a key factor in decision-making ahead of safety. We trusted that the clubs Carter played with knew better. Had we known that his helmet was unfit for the level he was playing, we would have gladly spent the money to keep him safe. Where it would be preferable that there were no concussions, the fact is there are. Carter finally received some meaningful treatment of his symptoms by visiting a clinic almost 2,000 kilometers away in Burnaby, BC. Dr. Sigalet was able to identify a spot in Carter's neck that was not healing, despite his being cleared to play by concussion protocol. Following his treatment, Carter regained his eyesight. He no longer has headaches. His grades in university have increased by 10%. He sleeps better, and he's been able to resume most activities. Canada has a lack of doctors trained in concussions. We were only able to locate 5 and had to travel to Vancouver area or Toronto to get the treatment. With the research that is coming out daily on concussions, we need more specialized practitioners across the country. It is impossible for a general practitioner to keep up with the data, and Carter is proof that there is help if you know where to find it. In closing, I'd like to thank you again for this opportunity. I truly believed my son was going to accomplish big dreams in hockey, but now that he cannot continue for his own safety, I believe that his story can make a difference in the lives of future hockey stars. I'm so grateful that my son didn't have to die like Rowan to be able to tell his story and make a difference in the lives of others.
That's fair. And thank you, Carter. We're going to hear now from Matthew Chiarotto and Kathy Leader, his mom.
All right, thank you. Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to share my story. My name is Matthew Chiarotto. I'm 13 years old, and I live in Toronto. I've loved hockey my whole life. I remember when I was 5 and my brother was 4, we begged my mom to sign us up to play. We've been on the same team ever since, progressing from house league to AA in a non-contact competitive hockey league. I got my first concussion when I was 10 in October of 2015. I was skating for the puck when someone hit me from behind and I flew into the boards and smashed my head on the ice. I started to feel nauseous and I saw stars. There was buzzing in my ears and I had a massive headache. My vision started to blur. The coaches helped me off the ice and escorted me to the dressing room. My words didn't make sense and I was very confused. I'd never had anything happen to me like this before and I was very scared. My recovery was very long, frustrating, and really boring. I felt like a caged animal. I couldn't do anything that I liked to do. No video games, no schoolwork, or even play with my friends. I couldn't even watch TV. It seemed to go on forever. The symptoms slowly went away, and everything was fine, and I got my life back. I returned to playing hockey 6 weeks after sustaining the concussion. Then I found out about an opportunity to do a video series on concussion with the GTHL, which is the Greater Toronto Hockey League. I auditioned, ended up being the spokesperson for the new concussion protocol that was being put in place by the GTHL and Holland Bloorview Children's Rehabilitation Hospital. I wanted to do it because I didn't want people to go through the same thing that I did. I wanted to spread awareness so that if kids got hurt, they could get the right information to recover properly. As the junior reporter, I interviewed kids, coaches, a few professional athletes, and even Don Cherry, which was super fun. In January of 2017, I was on the receiving end of someone's shoulder. It was during a rough game where coaches were being thrown out and parents were banging on the glass and screaming. It was a dangerous game that should have been stopped. This time when I got hit, I knew immediately that it was a concussion. I had the same symptoms as last time: headache, nausea, blurry vision, etc. It wasn't until a couple days later that we discovered that I couldn't read, which was very frightening. My recovery was very long, but I had more knowledge and insight into concussion, and I knew how to deal with it. And this concussion lasted 4 weeks. I had to make the tough decision. I decided to retire from hockey. The decision was difficult because hockey had been my passion and I was really good at it. The game was special for our family because my brother and I had always played on the same team. I really enjoyed the game, the competition, and the social element that it brought to my life. While it may have been a tough decision not to return to hockey, it was the right decision for me and my brain. My hope in relating my hockey experience to this subcommittee is to prevent concussion in other young hockey players so that they can continue to enjoy this great game. And that's my story so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew.
My name is Kathy Leader, and my son is Matthew. He suffered 2 concussions playing hockey. I feel really lucky that Matthew and his brain have fully recovered and that he does not have residual concussion symptoms. I'm also sad that he no longer plays a sport that he loves. Today, he's a well-rounded person, student, and athlete participating in tennis, golf, basketball, and swimming. But protecting his brain is always on our mind and his. I was at the game when Matthew was first injured. I didn't see the hit, but the reaction of the crowd, followed by the silence, made me aware that a player was hurt. Within a fraction of a second, I was able to determine that it was Matthew, because I did not see number 15 at the bench. The coaching staff helped Matthew off the ice, and I was desperate to scale the glass and claw my way through the mesh at the top. I do not remember getting to the dressing room. I do remember seeing Matthew holding his head and crying. He looked up and urgently tried to tell me something, but I couldn't understand because his words did not make sense. It was gibberish. The game kept going, but Matthews would be paused for the next 6 weeks. In any hockey arena, you will find physician parents always willing to lend a hand, as was the case that evening. And I heard, "Don't waste your time in the ER. Make sure you wake him up every hour. If he starts vomiting and his pupils are shot, he might have a brain bleed. He'll be fine in the morning. He didn't lose consciousness, he just got clocked." The next few days, we spent seeking medical help and searching the internet for information surrounding concussions. Up until that point, we didn't know much about concussions except that they happen to other people, not our son. My husband's a physician, and a colleague with experience in concussion diagnosed him. We were told to keep him in low light with little activity until his symptoms went away. The feeling of helplessness was overwhelming. You couldn't use medication, and a Band-Aid certainly was not going to help. The buzzing and pain in his head, as well as a sensitivity to light and sound, were too much for him to handle. He would feel better, and then he would feel worse. He would sleep, and then he would not. His team moved on, but he stayed paused. He couldn't play, read, watch TV, study, listen or play music, use the PS4, or go outside. His brother thought he was faking, and that made him really mad, and he couldn't even beat him up. Finally, Matthew felt better. He was cleared to return to his life on the ice. The opportunity he had as the junior reporter had us all learn about concussion and how injury was viewed in hockey. There are some common symptoms with a concussion, but everyone is different. Matthew spent the summer learning, interviewing, and educating the league about concussion and the new protocol, trying to make a difference. During that hockey season in January of 2017, 2 days after he turned 12, I saw Matthew hit in the head by the shoulder of another player just seconds before the final buzzer. The game ended, and I screamed as my son fell to the ice. The referees helped him to the dressing room, and I knew it wasn't good. The next day, Matthew was diagnosed with a concussion, and his life was paused again. This time, we knew more. This time, we had the resources of Holland Bloorview and their concussion center to help us. This concussion was similar, but different than the last. Buzzing in his ears, headache, nausea, fogginess, but something different. Matthew had lost the ability to read. lost the ability to read. That wasn't on the list of symptoms, I kept saying. And he said he saw squiggly lines and dots, but that they didn't connect. They didn't make sense. I literally collapsed inside. After speaking with the specialist, we found out that while not on the list, that Matthew's brain would probably heal. Just give it time. Luckily, a few days passed, and to our delight, he walked around reading everything in sight. After 4 weeks, Matthew's symptoms abated, and he felt better. He was cleared to return to his life. This time with a twist. Matthew would not be returning to the ice. He had decided to retire. He tried to go to games to cheer his brother and his teammates on, but it was too emotionally painful. Feeling sad but not defeated, I was proud to help Matthew make a video for parents and kids with helpful hints on how to recover from a concussion. Together, he and I have worked with different teams at Hull and Bloorview to help parents, kids, and healthcare providers understand this injury and its impact on kids and families. I had a suggestion or just a way of connecting what I would like to see happen. In the workplace, we're required to provide work that is safe. We look at how work is done and design the job to ensure that the worker and the environment are safe. Personal protective equipment is to be considered the last line of defense or last resort to ensure safety. Hockey is a high-speed collision sport with lots of intensity, placing players at risk for injury. I have to say that it is unnerving when parents and players are looking to helmets, mouthguards, and special jerseys for protection from concussion. I think we should take a look at how we design the game and how we play hockey. The culture needs to change. When Matthew was a junior reporter, he developed a tagline for his videos. The tagline was, "Respect your sport, play smart, play safe." Parents are key stakeholders that need to be engaged to make this a reality. They should be educated to ensure that the safety of their players are maintained so that they can play another day. What a shift where parents would demand safety rather than more ice time, where there would be no badge of honor to shake it off and take the next shift. Thank you for listening.
Ms. Leader, Matthew, thank you. And now we're going to have an opportunity to hear from Ash Kolstad.
Hi everyone, my name is Ash Kolstad and I'm currently an undergraduate student in the Faculty of Kinesiology at the University of Calgary. I want to thank you for this great honor of being invited to speak about my experiences with concussions from sport. In 2009, I was 12 years old and received 2 concussions while playing ice hockey at the Pee Wee level. This was when body checking was allowed. I recovered quickly from the first concussion after following the return to play protocols, but 3 weeks later I received a second concussion from an illegal body check from behind and elbow to my neck. This resulted in severe whiplash and concussion symptoms. This body check ended my hockey playing career and has changed my life ever since. The player who body checked me only received a 2-minute penalty for elbowing, while over 9 years later I'm still affected by post-concussive symptoms. During the concussion rehabilitation, I suffered from multiple severe symptoms. This included being extremely sensitive to light that caused me to wear sunglasses every day for 4 months, along with sound sensitivity. I suffered from severe dizziness and lack of balance that caused me to fall when I walked every 3 steps, so I had to be guided everywhere I went. Also, I had a throbbing headache that hasn't stopped for the past 9 years. This headache makes concentrating very difficult for me and caused me to miss the full grade 8 year of school. I would go days without sleep due to the headache, and then would finally just crash due to exhaustion, but even then that would be a few hours at a time. The injury changed me as a person, and I'm still not back to who I was before the injury. I used to be a fun, super athletic, and overall happy person, but I became a very sad and irritable person who suffers from depression and anxiety daily. Giving up ice hockey and not being able to be at school further precipitated my depression. Ice hockey was such a large part of my life, and it's where I met most of my friends. I would spend hours each week practicing and working on my skills, and also missing school for a full year was hard for me because I was an honor student and I really enjoyed learning and just having that routine in my life, so that was extremely difficult. That year, my days were either spent being at appointments, doing rehabilitation exercises, or staying in a dark room trying to rest. I never thought I was going to get better. I was taking medications that weren't helping, and it seemed like none of my doctors and the other health professionals I was seeing didn't know why my symptoms weren't going away. However, almost a year, the majority of my symptoms did go away. Symptoms I still suffer from include a constant headache, difficulties concentrating, anxiety, and depression. My experiences with concussion are interesting because back then there was a lack of knowledge and awareness of what a concussion was. The injury was thought of as just a bump on the head rather than what it actually is a type of brain injury. I heard many negative comments from other parents and kids in my community suggesting that I was faking or milking the injury to gain attention. And one of my coaches would tell my mom the hit wasn't that bad. He shouldn't still be hurt. And these resulted in us not wanting to be around the hockey community anymore. And these negative comments also led me to try and cope with my headaches by just trying to forget about it, not talking about it, just trying to move on. A couple of years after the concussion, I felt like I needed to be part of ice hockey again, and this is when I was fortunate to have opportunities to assistant coach teams at various age levels. This broadened my perspective on the sport of how coaches and parents perceived and talked about injuries such as concussions. But looking back now, I think my concussions likely could have been prevented if stricter policies were in place to limit concussion risk. Suffering this injury has led me to being part of concussion research that also broadens my knowledge about concussions and how they can be prevented and managed. I want to make a difference by advocating for more awareness and more knowledge about this injury so no one has to go through what I have. I would like to thank the Sport Injury Prevention Research Center and Integrated Concussion Research Program at the University of Calgary, as well as my supervisors and mentors, Drs. Carolyn Emery, Keith Yates, Catherine Schneider, Tyler Clough, and Brent Hagel, for giving me opportunities to do concussion research and to advocate for improving the prevention and care of this potential life-changing injury. I also want to thank Mr. Ken Dryden, Chairman Fonseca, Mr. Adam LaRoche, Minister Duncan, and the rest of this subcommittee for inviting me to speak here today and for taking an interest in reducing concussion in sport. Thank you.
Well, Ash, thank you, and thank you for sharing to all the witnesses, your very personal and compelling stories. This takes us now to the opportunity for the members to ask you questions. We're going to be starting off with the Liberals, and Dr. Doug Olfson from the Winnipeg area will be asking the first questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Excuse me. Thank you all for testifying and for coming here today. This is very helpful, and I know it takes a lot of courage to describe these experiences because they're obviously very traumatic events in your lives. Ms. Leader, I wanted to start with you. I just wanted to clarify. You said after one of the concussions, you were told, don't waste your time in the emergency department. Is that right?
It was outside of the locker room and just everybody giving you
Okay.
all kinds of advice. Do you go to the emergency room? Do you not? It's a
Yeah.
common thing. Like, what should you do?
Okay.
When is it serious enough?
Okay, this wasn't advice from one of the coaches or
No,
anything.
it's
Oh,
just
okay.
everybody when an injury happens, everybody has their
Oh, absolutely, yes.
commentary.
Yes.
But it is a very real thing when kids, I mean, when you end up with a family with a concussion, you become a resource for other families when it happens, and you get phone calls, should I take my child to the emergency room? And but yes, it was just more conversation outside.
Okay, thank you. Now, Carter, I understand that this is, again, it sounds like a very troubling history of some of the things that were described here. I just wanted to expand on something that your mother was saying in the testimony, that I guess there was a hit list from the other coach. Was that your understanding of what was going on?
Yeah. I guess after the 2 years, end of my 18-year-old year when I got taken out, the following year we had a guy acquired from Kindersley on our team, and he said that their head coach had a list of players that he was okay with them taking extra liberties on.
All right, yeah, I'm so sorry to hear that. That's a horrible thing to find out. That kind of thing goes on. We talk a lot about violence in sports, and somehow some cultures will tolerate it. Would you say that in the sport in the league that you were in, did that seem to be tolerated, when there was violence going on, when there was obvious dirty hits, that sort of thing?
I don't know if it's tolerated. There's just some people that think it's okay.
All right. Next question I want to open up, and I'll ask everyone in turn about this. One of the controversies that comes up in the media, it's talked about, on the sport networks, sportscasters will talk about this. It's the issue of fighting in hockey. It's technically against the rules, but we also know that it's tolerated by the leagues. And a lot of sportscasters say, well, it brings in such ratings that the leagues are just never going to get rid of the fighting in professional hockey. I'm going to start with you, Carter. Would you say, do you know if that attitude in professional hockey was in any way coloring the judgment of people in hockey? Were people who were aspiring to, go into pro hockey thinking that this would be a part of their careers?
I don't think anyone really plays hockey to become a fighter. It's just kind of how they make their living. Just, some guys aren't quite good enough skill-wise, so they learn to fight, and if they do that well, they can find a spot on teams at higher levels.
Okay, thank you. Ash, what is your opinion on that? The same question.
It's an interesting question for sure. I think we need to remember that the NHL and stuff, it's a business, right? And they're in for making money, and people enjoy watching fightings while they're at the games. But the negative side of that is that it's really impressionable to the younger players and so forth. So I think when rules in younger leagues are allowed, such as, I'll use body checking just because I know that the most, if body checking is allowed, it sort of changes the mindset of the players, whereas rather than going for the puck, they're just going to go and make the hit, right? And then it turns into a competition between their friends who can have the biggest hit and so forth.
Mm-hmm. And Matthew, what are your thoughts on that? Did you find that people were I guess what was in your league? What was the attitude towards the fighting you were seeing in pro hockey?
Well, a lot of people were like, "Oh, why did you see that fight last night?" And it's not really part of the game that I'd say is enjoyable to watch. Like, a lot of people enjoy it, but personally, my attitude towards fighting is there's a lot of other ways to get back at someone other than fighting them. Like, you can strip the puck off of them and do a nice dangle and score. It's not really one of those things that you have to just shove the other person. There's a lot of other ways.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay. Did you get a chance to when you said you interviewed Don Cherry? Did you ask him about fighting in hockey?
Oh, definitely, yeah. He said there's a lot of really big hits that he remembers, and he said that was one of the most enjoyable parts of the game, just seeing two guys go at it, which is one of the things that's really fun.
He told you that in an interview?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. How much time do I have, Mr. Chair? A minute. Okay, thank you. And so, Ash, apparently you said as well you were accused of malingering, that you were faking it. Is that right? Again, that I find as a physician, I find that disturbing. What was there a culture in your game or in your league to kind of, when someone was injured, kind of walk it off, be tough?
Yeah, for sure. I think that is a culture in a lot of sports, and especially in hockey, was that you're trying to play through it, right? And I wanted to play through. I know after I got hit, I went off to the bench and I started to feel a bit dizzy, but I wanted to try and go out for another shift. So I went out for about 10 seconds and then I said, nope, I can't do this, and went off to the bench and told my coach. So there is sort of that mentality of, this game's fun, I want to play through it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, congratulations on the good judgment of saying, no, I can't do this and getting off. I wish more players would. I wish they would, yeah. That's my time. Thank you very much.
So we're going to be moving over to the Conservatives now, and Mr. Robert Kitchen from Saskatchewan.
Thank you all for being here. I appreciate you taking the time and telling us your stories. And I appreciate you. I understand from the story with the picture, and I kind of hope you would actually share with my colleagues Carter's picture with a Weyburn Red Wing jersey on instead. But I understand the rationale. Carter, I have a question for you. Oftentimes in hockey, we hear terms of run the goalie. And I've never had a chance to actually ask a goalie, and having known you for many, many years and watch you progress, what does that mean to you?
I guess just going after the goaltenders unnecessarily. Like if the puck is gone, you don't need to make contact. I understand if the puck is in my equipment or there's a scramble in front of the net, some contact, but going out of your way to make that contact, yes, would be the best way for me to describe it.
Right. How many times would you say you've been run?
I'm not sure.
Would you say it happens every game?
Since word got out of my concussions, it was a lot of the time more than once a game.
Right. And I mean, I know some coaches would say we're telling our players to drive to the net, but oftentimes there's that fine line between running a goalie and going to the net. From your experience, and I don't know whether you've ever even thought about it, is there something that could be said to maybe stop that, to defer that?
I don't think so. Because at the end of the day, the players have to make their own choice, and if they're going to plow through the goalie, they're going to do it.
And I see your hand up. Would comment.
I would really like to see the league start implementing the rule that there is zero contact with the goalie, and penalties, suspensions, whatever handed down as soon as there is. Just this last weekend, I watched our Weyburn Red Wing goalie be bowled over 3 times, and there wasn't a single call on that. And they went under him. They were in the net behind him, and there was no call. They had no reason to be in that crease whatsoever. To me, the crease should be sacred, and they have to stay out.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Kathy, I appreciate your comments one of the things that we've heard a lot from people is the issue of dealing with doctors, and you mentioned the challenges, and people say do this, do that, don't do that, and it's a big challenge. And within professions, there are recognized people that have skills, sports-specific skills, whether it's a chiropractor, whether it's a medical doctor, whether it's a physical therapist, etc., that have those. Would you think that would be of value, that's published a lot more readily to sporting groups?
Interestingly, I worked with I think it was the Ontario Neurotrauma Foundation on an educational brochure to help parents and families go out and try to find resources, because a lot of people claim to have concussion services. They can help you get better, and they list my personal preference is research-based care, because there are a whole host of different things you can say that you can provide. But I've just found, working with the staff at Hull and Bloor Review and their research team, the studies they do are real. They are working to improve every day on the information that gets out to parents and kids on how to get them back faster. So I guess to summarize, research-based care, I think it has more value than just having a lot of clinics.
Great, thank you. Ash, I wish you well in your studies. I'm a kinesiology graduate, so I'm wishing you well with that. Within your study, the research that you're doing in this area, can you describe some of that for us?
I can talk a bit about it. I'm looking at if body checking's disallowed, if that's any changes in offensive performance. I'm also looking at things more on the effects after concussion, if you have from more the sensory motor side of things, so movement and whatnot. And those are sort of the projects that I've been working on, yeah.
Do you find oftentimes that you can relate to some of those aspects on your own personal experiences?
Yeah, for sure. And also another project I've done is it's called patient engagement research. So it's trying to understand the experiences of adolescents who've gone through the concussion rehabilitation. So I've had a concussion, so I conduct qualitative through interviews and focus groups and try to gain the perspective of other individuals' experiences. So yeah, that it's really relative to me, and that's why I'm so interested in it, is because it is relative to me.
Okay. Matthew, very quick, because I think I'm running out of time. You talked about, you've done a video and did a lot of work in the protocol. Can you explain some of that very briefly as to how you did that? What sort of things did you talk about?
Well, a lot of the stuff we talked about was because a lot of people are confused about symptoms of a concussion. A lot of people think you have to black out to have one. Well, what I basically did and what me and my mom did was basically clarify all the symptoms and everything that you're not allowed to do, everything that you're supposed to do, and some things that you should look out for. And we also went along with Holland Blue Review. They did a return to sport protocol. So we also tried to follow that and just basically outline some good things for kids to do to keep occupied and basically make it through their concussion.
Thank you. We'll be moving now to the NDP and MP Cheryl Hardcastle from the Windsor area for 7 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My first question is for Carter. For you to return to the game now, with this committee, can you describe to us, if you have any uncertain terms, what would the terms be? What would this game look like if you were to return?
I'm not really sure. I guess I wouldn't want to get ran all the time. But, just the crease rule, I think in the IIHF, the whistle is blown anytime someone on the opposing team enters the crease, and I think that would have went a long way for me being able to play.
Mm-hmm. And do you want to maybe embellish on what Carter's sentiments are? What you think that should look like? Just knowing what a goalie has gone through and the kind of culture that we have in the sport.
Yeah, well, as I had said in my speech, there was just, it just seemed like it was part of the culture that they wanted to get the goalie. I really think that crease rule needs to come in. And as I said before, I really think coaches need to be held accountable. Ultimately, in the end, they are the ones that are telling their players what to do on the ice and what they expect of them. And like that one coach who had the hit list, it was clear that team ran him twice. That team ended his season 2 times. I think coaches need to be held accountable, and coaches need more training in what these concussions are. This isn't like a broken bone. It doesn't heal and you're done with it. This is lifelong. We don't know what symptoms are to come 20, 30, 40 years down the road. And I think it's being brushed over. I think coaches need to be trained.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I didn't.
Go ahead.
The other thing that I hadn't mentioned that I think is really important is also how these leagues ignore you once you're done. As soon as Carter was finished playing, announced his retirement, we have had no contact from anyone, emotionally or financially. We were given a very small amount of time to submit some invoices for concussion treatment by Hockey Canada. But there was a time limit on those. And so we have spent thousands, and I mean thousands of dollars in treatments on him. And we've been given less than $500. Oh. And everybody just basically washed their hands of us. We're done with you.
Wow. I think that goes to my next question. Maybe I'll give you a little bit of chance to think about it, because I'm going to touch base with Kathy, Matthew, and Ash on this question, but I was going to ask you how mental health needs were addressed as compared to like physical. Okay, so I'll give you a minute to think about that while these guys quickly respond. I have a time limit, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts. What would the game look like? Go ahead. Ash, do you want to start?
For me, it was, I guess, just trial and error with a bunch of different things. First, it really started with medications, and then when that wasn't helping, it turned to more biofeedback, so controlling breathing and whatnot. But I think social support for me was a key factor in trying to keep my mental health positive. And yeah.
Okay, and Matthew, do you want to do you want to talk to me about mental health needs, or do you want to talk to me about what you think the changes to the game should look like? And I just want to point out, what I mean by changes to the game are not just at the amateur level, because no matter what happens, if it doesn't happen at the higher level, like the NHL level that we all aspire to, like your conversation with Don Cherry, it won't matter, right? A change has to happen clear across the board. So if you're going to talk about that, keep that in mind too. Go ahead.
I wrote down some stuff about this too. I also had like a couple points. And I wrote down, also at the top of the league, there's, for amateur, you should stop games that have too many penalties or have become too difficult for officials to safely manage. I personally have experience in those games because it's tempers flare and it's not a safe environment. There should also be fewer games, allowing for more skill practices. More skating work makes for better skaters, and better skaters are safer skaters. Players should also have safety-specific training to keep them out of harm and make them aware of risky situations. And at the top of the level, I think that the NHL influences how a lot of kids play, like a couple people mentioned earlier. And we all want to live that dream of playing in the NHL. And also, Ken Dryden, who was here a couple days ago, wrote a book, and he has many ideas on how to slow the game down and still make it exciting to watch and play. But I also think that NHL players should keep in mind that there's a lot of kids out there who look up to them as role models, and they should also just kind of watch how they play.
Thank you. Okay, I'll go back to the Ferris now. I don't know, Carter, if you want to speak or if you want to let Anne go first.
My mom can go.
Okay, go ahead, Anne. Always a good answer.
As far as the mental health end goes, as far as the mental health end went, it was never addressed with Carter. We had trouble finding any doctor or anybody that could help him with anything. And being in Saskatchewan, I mean, I was on the internet, I was trying to find out. I actually finally saw a video of a doctor down in California who spent all of his time focused on concussions and the mental health end of it. And he actually treated bomb blast victims and war vets and stuff like that. And that is how I heard about this doctor in Vancouver. And so once we saw that, we immediately contacted him, and he was able to alleviate almost all of Carter's symptoms.
Good.
Yeah, I should let the witnesses know that we do have interpretation services available in English and French. We're going to be moving to the Liberals now for 7 minutes, and Madame Fortier.
Merci beaucoup. Alors,
thank you very much, and once again, thank you for your testimony. We really need to understand what experiences you've lived, and the fact of the matter is that there are concussions that are very problematic. Now, Ms. Hardcastle took a number of my questions, but I think we should further explore them. And Ken Dryden mentioned that we need to change the culture of sport in Canada. And if I've understood correctly, you are comfortable with that fact and the way things are. So what should be done, given your experience? How should the rules of the game be changed? You've already mentioned a few examples, but could you elaborate on what you said? First, do you agree to the need for a change of the rules? And secondly, what kind of environment would be needed to achieve that goal of changing the rules? Matthew, please.
I mean, I agree with that there should be some change with the rules. I mean, there are a lot. But I think that the NHL, like, a lot of hockey rules should be changed because a lot of kids are getting hurt. And I think someone who can even talk more about that, can you elaborate on some rules that can be changed?
I guess it's not really there's the culture, and then there's ways that the games can be played. And I go back to the workplace analogy. I mean, people come to work just like kids come to games. Kids need to grow up into adults and be healthy. And I'm not sure that the culture is 100% focused on the health and safety of the kids. I mean, it's how to get faster, and how to get more ice time, parent like action and goals. Ash mentioned, it becomes a very big part of your social life. You're almost on vacation with these people when you travel to tournaments. And so it ties into so many elements of an individual and a kid growing up. They're your friends, and it's your family. You spend so much time with them, and there's so much money spent. If we spent more money, time, and energy focused on how to play the game safely, redesigning it, my son would have benefited from parents and coaches spending more time learning respect for the game and individuals as players, so that he wouldn't have been hit. Some of the things said.
Just a Saturday morning event. That's
No,
what you're saying.
No.
Really?
Yeah. And some of the things said, like, there are some dark sides, and there are some egos. And I love the game. I think it's great. My sons have enjoyed it and really benefited from participation. But I do think that slowing it down and making it about plays, not about hits, making it about learning the skills, and maybe less on the speed and the intensity, like
Merci.
that.
Ash?
That's a really complex question, and I
know.
like it. Just from the sport level around policy changes, I think we really need the research to tell us what the effect is of policy changes. Like, I know there's research out there for disallowing body checking, that reduces injury and concussion, but I think there needs to be a large focus also placed on what happens when a concussion occurs or suspected concussion. Are the coaches watching? What are the coaches doing? Are they following that when in doubt, sit them out policy? Are they making sure that the player has been medically cleared to return back before participating again? So I think a really large focus needs to be placed on what happens when a suspected concussion occurs.
Carter, est-ce que tu veux ajouter sur ma question?
Carter, would you like to elaborate?
I guess for me, I think the rules maybe just need to be upheld a little bit stiffer, and players need to be taught how to protect themselves at a younger age and maybe be able to avoid some of those hits.
And did you want to add something as a parent?
The helmet thing, I agree 100% the culture needs to change. But I do also believe Carter's first 3 concussions wouldn't have happened if he'd been wearing the correct helmet for his level. And there was many opportunities for somebody to have figured that out. All it would take is a list and a trainer on every team, even the little guys, to tell them what kind of approved helmet they need to be safe. When Carter received the correct helmet, he never again received a concussion from a puck to the head.
Puis, je vais changer la...
I'll go on another tack now, if I may, in my questioning. When you started playing, did you discuss with your team members, your teammates, the existence of concussions with your trainers, with your coaches, with your parents? Or was it only when you started playing that you became aware of the problem? I'll start with Carter, please. And I don't have much time left, so if you could be concise, please. Thank you.
There wasn't much when I was younger. Like, I knew they existed, but that was about it. Wasn't until guess midget when I saw guys getting them, and then when I made it to junior, there's baseline testing, but other than that, you don't hear anything of it until it actually happens.
Okay. Ash?
I agree with that fully. I didn't even know what a concussion was when I had my first one. I had never heard of that term before. And even after a few years of my second one, I was explaining to people what happened, what it was. So I don't ever remember talking to anyone. Yeah.
We're actually going to be moving into our second round of questions. These will be for 5 minutes. I understand, Ms. Kusi, welcome to our committee.
Thank you,
here
Chair.
on sport-related concussions. Ms. Kusi is
Thank
from the
you.
Calgary area, and you'll be sharing your time with Mr. Kitchen.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, thank you. Previously, I was Deputy Shadow Minister for Health. I've moved on in the portfolio, but more important to me today is I'm the mother of a 7-year-old boy that plays hockey, and this is really terrifying for me to hear, and I feel very grateful that I got to sub in today on this occasion. And I just want to thank you all so much for being here to share your stories, and just being so brave to confront this and to share your stories with us, and of course with Canadians. And I will say that I'm a mother who far would have preferred that my son do robotics or a debate club, even though my community does have a very proud tradition of minor hockey, but my son really wanted to do this, and my husband really wanted to do this with him, sort of as a family activity. And so, and he enjoys it, but he's also in the process now of deciding whether or not he wants to be a goalie, which is really scary for me. They alternate right now, and he played that role recently, and so I sort of watch in trepidation as he makes the decision to decide. But so I guess my comment is just that, I think every parent who has their child in hockey should have the fear that is instilled with me today. And when everyone sees this picture of Carter, they should be thinking of their son or daughter who plays hockey as well. And my only question was, because I wasn't certain, is that parents are required to take a significant conduct overview prior to their child stepping onto the ice. And I was just curious as to whether or not this conduct tutorial included a segment on concussions, because if so, I'm happy to hear that. And if not, then I certainly feel that it should be included. If any of our witnesses here today have that information, I would appreciate it. No? Okay. Well then, perhaps that's something that we could check into as the critics of that. And with that, again, thank you so much for being here and for your messages to us, and I'll pass the time on to my colleague, Mr. Kitchen.
Thank you. I just want to touch on a point that Anne had brought up and sort of touched on a little bit, and just recognizing that this is a study of sport concussions, not just hockey concussions, and they do happen in other sports. I mean, my statistics say that 48% happen in hockey, but other sports, including soccer, football, basketball, rugby, volleyball, etc., they do all happen in, and so we need to be cognizant of that. So this question might have a little bit bearing because it deals with equipment, and Anne, you brought that up, and I spent many years as a coach, a parent, a trainer, a team doctor, a manager, the whole 9 yards. And as Kathy, as you said, it was my life during the wintertime. It's what got us through winters in Saskatchewan, right, Anne? It's how it worked. You rent from September till April, and you were family. And that was your livelihood. And when it's taken from you, it's very hard. On the point of equipment, and oftentimes I found as I coach, it's a challenge to a coach too. And I granted we want to look at this to say the coaches need that training, and I think we need to ask that. But they're relying on, when they go into a sports store, that person there is knowledgeable in providing me with the right equipment. They're providing me with the right fitting shoulder pads. And they don't understand that when you put shoulder pads on, mom says, I want the big ones, or dad says, I want the big ones because it makes my boy look big, when in reality, those are probably worse for him than the smaller ones. They want skates that are 2 sizes too big. Why? Because he's going to grow this year, and therefore I want him to get through the winter on 1 pair of skates, which are $200, than 2 pairs. So those are big challenges. Helmets are another aspect. And we look at things and we see the CSA standards stamped on that helmet, and we say, okay, this is approved. And that's a challenge. And I'd just like to hear your general comments on that. Is that enough? Do we need more than just CSA approved? Do we need more training for the trainers, for the doctors, for the equipment manufacturers? Anne?
Yes, I think we totally need all of that. We went to a store, and we went to a store that sold the high-end pro equipment. They knew what level of hockey Carter was playing at. They gave us the recommendations. Like I say, the sticker on it said it was NHL approved. So I didn't think there was any way that helmet wasn't good enough. And yet as soon as the trainer in Kamloops had a look at it, he said, well, this helmet is terrible. You should never have been wearing it since Bantam Hockey, since he was 14 years old. And I could only rely on what the store was telling me. I knew nothing better. And I knew at $1,000, it darn well should protect his head. So yeah, there needs to be some kind of standard out there, and somebody who can check these kids' equipment so that they know it's proper.
Thank you.
Obviously the CS.
Thanks, Ann.
The stamp.
We're moving over to the Liberals and Mr. Darren Fisher from Dartmouth Cole Harbour, Nova Scotia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much to all of you for being here, parents and athletes. You all identify as athletes. That's how you saw yourself when you played the game. That was your identity. You were also a student. You were also people's friends. You were also, but you all identified as an athlete, and you've all lost so much. The 3 of you are no longer playing the sport you love, that you grew up loving and that you grew up working so hard to get good at. Matthew, Ash, Carter. Carter's a strong, silent type. He may not want to chime in too much on this. He reminds me of my 17-year-old son, who they won tonight, 5-2. Ash, 9 years later, you're still feeling the impacts of a concussion. What, besides the obvious things and the things that you've had in your testimony tonight, and thank you very much for this, what else have you lost? I think about, you lost your whole grade 8 of school. You've all lost school time. You may all now have different groups of friends that are no longer the groups of friends that you were with when you played sport. What else have you lost? And I'll start with Ash, but feel free, anyone that wants to chime in.
I mean, in my case, hockey, it was extremely important to me. It was 8 years of my life that I was playing that sport, and to have it taken away from me in such an instant, as you said, yeah, it was super hard for me. I think it was after the concussion, when I was going back to school and I was still hanging out with my friends, and they were all still playing hockey, most of them on the same team, and they were talking about what happened in last night's game, what happened in the weekend tournament, right? And I couldn't feel a part of that conversation anymore. So it really was hard, because it made me feel like I had to isolate myself from talking to people, because I just couldn't fit in anymore. I was sort of the concussion guy in a way.
Still friends with that same group of friends that you grew up through the system with?
Some of them, yes, but not all of them, yeah.
Matthew, what else besides the obvious do you feel you've lost?
Definitely, like Ash said, hockey. It was a really big sport in my life, and especially since my brother played on the same team as me. After I left hockey, it was really sad, and I didn't really feel that happy when I was watching my brother play the game, and that I couldn't play because it was too dangerous for me, and I didn't want to get hurt again. I lost time in school that I couldn't gain back. I lost time with my friends, but definitely the most important was hockey, because it was such a big part of my life, and I'm really sad that I can't play anymore, but it was the right decision for me in the end.
Well, Carter, do you want to chime in on that at all?
Well, sure. I guess for me, it's just the social aspect of it. I think I'm pretty quiet, as you said, to begin with. And hockey kind of pulled me out of my shell every day, and I enjoyed it a lot. And now that's just, now I had to go make new friends, and just how it is now.
Matthew, we were chatting outside earlier, and you, I think it was you or your mom said you wanted to turn a bad situation into a good one. And you're a junior sportscaster, and I hope someday maybe you'll hire me when you are working at Sportsnet or TSN as a sportscaster. I think it was you that said something about refs losing control of a game. I've been to many games where refs have been perceived as losing control. Did you say, I know Anne made a lot of recommendations as well, but were you recommending that referees just have the ability to shut the game down? Because they have that ability, but I don't think that they exercise it very often because the crowd would probably go crazy.
Yeah, I think I did. I don't. I think definitely that they have the ability to do that, and they should, because a lot of games, especially games that I've participated in, get really out of hand, where there's kids getting suspended, people throwing wild hits, to the point where you can't really classify it as hockey anymore. There's just kids in the league that I played in, it's non-contact, and there's still like penalties that are going, like you have an extra game sheet that you have to fill up. And definitely I think that some games should be like shut down because they're just out of control to the point like.
Do I have any time, Mr. Chair?
About 20 seconds.
Kathy, you started to say something when I moved off to Carter there. Is there something, did you want to make a point?
I just wanted to say, like, there's a great sense of self that gets lost from a kid who identifies with one sport, and that was really hard transitioning to something else where you're not going to end up with a concussion. And I think our family suffers from post-concussion bubble wrap syndrome, where we just literally want to take both the kids and wrap them up. And I mean, we sent Matthew to a basketball camp, and a kid lost his temper and shoved him against the wall, and he came back with a bump on his head. And it builds. But it is very difficult when you identify yourself through a sport with all those things, when you lose it, and trying to regain that sense back. It's tough.
Thank you. In this round, so we're going to be moving over to the Conservatives, then the Liberals, then the NDP. We're going to have some extra time. So if the members can just start thinking about maybe if they have one question that they would want to ask the witnesses as we conclude today at the end of our second session here, that would be great. So we're going to be moving over again to Mr. Kitchen.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you again. I'm going to ask. And Kathy sort of touched on it a little bit just a second ago on someone that puts their life into one sport. Matthew, did you ever play other sports besides hockey?
Not really. I was really invested in hockey because I always had the dream of playing in the NHL and being this big superstar, but in the end it's not really realistic. But I discovered a lot of other sports after I played hockey, which was kind of my downfall because hockey wasn't the sport that I really was meant to play in. But I found a lot of other sports like basketball and tennis, which are really good for me, but I wish I discovered them later because it's just getting taken out of hockey was a really big blow, and I'd love to have something that would have cushioned my fall.
Right. Okay. Ash?
I played multiple sports. So in the summers and spring, I played lacrosse and whatnot, and golf, which was fun. So golf was still, I was still able to play that, but it was really in the winters that I wasn't able to play really any sport because I wasn't cleared to play any type of contact sport. And that's really when I wanted to take up coaching.
Doctors cleared you for lacrosse?
No, I didn't play lacrosse.
Okay,
I had to play lacrosse
sorry,
too. Yeah, I wasn't as devastated because I still had golf.
Okay. Did you play any other sports when you were playing hockey at that time, before your concussions?
Nope, not in the
Hockey
winters.
was basically all you focused on. Soccer or baseball during the summertime, or
Nope.
Carter?
Yes, I played baseball until I was 11 or 12, but then stopped to play summer hockey.
And then you just went summer hockey, and then the hockey season sort of melded into itself day after day. Okay. Do you play sports now, Carter? Like other sports? Intramurals
Just
or?
golf, really.
Pardon?
Just golf.
Just golf? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The reason why I'm going with that is just there are some risks with other sports that are out there, and I was just wondering if you guys had any experience along those lines, and do you have any friends that maybe played volleyball and basically took a ball in the head that you can comment on?
Just from my research lab that I'm a part of, is there used to be a rule where in practice they would hit the ball over the net and then run underneath the net to go get their ball. Meanwhile, the person behind them in line would also spike the ball down, and that resulted in concussions, being hit in the back of the head with the ball. So there was policy change last year, I believe, where now they're no longer allowed to run under the net. They have to stop, run around the net to go get their ball to try and reduce concussion. And one of my friends, who's the main researcher on that, had said that he's been hit in the head trying to get his ball.
Oh, that's where. Thank you very much for that, Kathy.
Through our journey, like meeting people and talking about concussion, we've met dancers, gymnasts, my nephew skiing, my niece skiing in a collision, falling off playground equipment, and I mean even Matthew in swimming, a kid kicked him in the head doing laps, and so that's been our experience as far as meeting others.
I remember when I first took skiing, we didn't wear helmets. Mind you, we were wearing wooden skis and strap binders in those days and lace-up boots. But the reality is, those are a few years ago. In the Maritimes, I learned them too. Anyway, when we're looking at this aspect of it, and as Ash sort of pointed out, it's the sporting body that's made changes, for example, in volleyball to make sure we're seeing less injuries. How much emphasis should we be placing on those sporting bodies to actually step up in this avenue to make those changes? Kathy?
I mean, I think you have to place a lot of responsibility on them. They're the ones that run the game. They're the ones that charge the fees. They're the ones that have the expertise. They're the ones that can engage the parents, that can find coaches or hire trainers and provide for the expertise so that people are wearing the proper equipment. I mean, they know the game. They're the experts.
So you're and Ash?
I think it's important also. I think just sporting organizations, my impression is that they're trying to follow what the research shows. So I think partnering with research institutes to test out if changes that they want to make are actually effective are crucial.
So we're going to be moving over to the Liberals again, and Mr. Darren Fisher.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. You're all such excellent advocates, and this is going to increase awareness. And just talking about this and having things like this televised is going to increase awareness for concussions. I keep thinking about the comments about, in the smaller towns and the minor hockey associations, there's nobody really around when something like that happens. Someone will say, "Oh, just wake them up every hour." I think it might have been Ann that might have said that. And I think about the level of support, knowledge, technology at the higher levels, and we have to find a way. I said this last week when Mr. Dryden was here. To find a way to filter that down, whether it's through training. But, Ann, you were talking about equipment. You're talking about the $1,000 helmet. And you said, I would gladly spend the money to keep him safe. What a great lesson. I will say, my son plays competitive hockey, so I try to buy the best helmet. And I assume that the highest price tag is the best helmet. So I will say that I really hadn't considered that it wasn't until you said that. And it's astonishing. However, I will say we can't have the sports stores holding that, having to have that ability to, we expect someone that's fitting our kids with shoulder pads to know what size, but we really can't put the onus on them for that. But someone said, I think maybe it was Bob, maybe Robert said something about CSA, or somebody said something about CSA. Maybe we need to get to a higher standard, because I will say that, I come from the era of the old Jaffa helmet that looked like a cardboard box. it's much, much better than it was. But the players are bigger, they're stronger, they're faster, and they're hurtling themselves at each other because, as I think it was Matthew that said, kids look up to the NHL players and they play the game the way they play it. And that seems to be just the way it is. So maybe we need to get to a higher standard. And you made a lot of recommendations, and I didn't get them all jotted down. But if you've got the ability, and any of you have got the ability, and you want to submit them to us in a list form, I know that it's very important that we hear your suggestions for the things that and again, I know I'm mixing up everybody's testimony because it's all coming at us, but I do like the idea of maybe a higher test than maybe CSA approved. I looked at my helmet the other day since being named to this committee, and my helmet said 2009. So the helmet that I'm using, that's gentleman's hockey, but I'm more likely to do damage to myself by falling into the boards than being pushed in. But 2009, that helmet was no longer good by 2012 standards. So there's a lot we can learn here. So if you've got recommendations, you want to throw them out there, that would be great. Sorry, that wasn't really a question, Ann. I was just commenting on some of the things that you said. And you also said when Carter was first diagnosed with a concussion, maybe you sort of implied that he'd had several more before then, but you just thought they were headaches?
Yeah, he started playing midget AAA away from home. He was actually only 14 years old, which broke my heart to leave home at that age. But that year he was wearing that helmet that shouldn't have been used past bantam. And he complained of headaches all the time. And no one on the team clued in that he had concussion. His dad and I didn't even clue in. We actually chalked it up to homesickness and being away from home. And now looking back, we wonder if he didn't have a concussion for most of that year. He was frequently taking shots to the head in practice. And we did actually go to the team about that and say, look, this has to stop. Look at the marks on his helmet. Even on the back of his helmet, there was puck marks where there isn't enough protection for sure. And they didn't do anything about it.
You talk about the competition, running, crashing the net and things like that with Carter, and you said that there were suspensions, but the suspensions were never enough to change behavior. So were they 3 games, 6 games, 2 games, or does it matter? Does it matter if there's a headhunter out there? Oh, did we lose you? Did we lose you, Ann? Oh, we lost him.
I'm still here.
Oh, okay.
Carter's speaking. I couldn't hear him.
Oh, sorry. Oh, was Carter talking? So yeah. So
yeah,
I was just sort of.
As far as the suspensions went, they started off with a 3-game suspension. The next one, I believe, went to 6. And then the next one went to 8 games. And then the one that finally did him in for good was, I believe, 6 games for the player and 3 for the coach. So, yeah, and these were 1 month apart. So, but our league also was notorious for not putting these suspensions out there for everybody to see. So the teams knew it happened, but the general public really didn't know anything about it.
Thank you. So we're going to move over to the NDP and Ms. Hardcastle.
Thank you. My understanding just a minute ago is that, Carter, you were making some comments. They're not on the record. We didn't hear you. So if you said something just a minute ago, could you repeat it before your mom spoke when there was that? We thought it was a moment of silence. So if you did say something, there was a misunderstanding and we need to hear you repeat it, please.
Yeah, I don't think the suspensions were enough. But with one of them, I guess in the case of most of them, it was an attempt to either win the game or keep their season alive. And at the end of the day, everyone just wants to win and keep playing.
Okay, thank you. And I guess now you all know that this is a subcommittee of the Health Committee. So we have heard a little bit about, yes, you can get concussions from a variety of different sports. As a matter of fact, we probably know that brain injury like this can come from a variety of different activities and accidents. So that being said, think about our role here and the federal government's role in what you would see as helping in addressing the effects of concussions. And what we've heard so far from witnesses previously is that there is a gap in understanding from physical injury and mental and the brain injury. And maybe you can just share a little bit about your experiences and where you think we should be, different paths we should be going down and exploring in terms of your experience. I don't know who wants to go first. Anne, you're very...
well, I don't think I have anything new to add, other than I think leagues need to put it out there that the proper equipment, and have somebody that is trained to identify the proper equipment. I think the suspensions, the league rules need to change in order to protect these kids. And I think the aftercare needs to come into it as well.
Yeah.
Because yes, you quit, but we're not done with you.
Exactly. And I think you were telling us that you went, you had a lot of the onus was on yourself to find this doctor in, I think you said it was in Victoria?
Burnaby.
In Burnaby. You went to find this doctor, and I'm just assuming you were surprised that these kind of doctors are so few and far between. You took this initiative. Was your family, did your family doctor recommend that you find this doctor, or did you go on the internet yourself?
We were strictly on our own. There wasn't a single person that involved in hockey that could give us any advice. His last concussion, he was ambulanced to Saskatoon Hospital for a CT scan to make sure he didn't have a brain bleed because of some worrisome symptoms. No one gave us anything in the medical community or in the hockey community. We were on our own 100%.
Our second round, but if the members, as I said, we do have some time. If the members have one question that they would like to ask of the witnesses, this is an opportunity to be able to do that. We can just go around the table if members have any. No? Ms. Hardcastle, you would like to continue? Sure.
Yeah. I just wanted to ask Matthew or Kathy or Ash if you wanted to expand on those comments, just about how you had to go and find your treatment for the brain injury aspect.
Yeah, for my concussion, as soon as I went to the bench, there was a lot of conflicting opinions. It wasn't the immediate reaction, you have a concussion. It was, can you go back out? Are you okay? But I think my mom can explain from the parental view, like some of the conflicting information that she...
Just from Matthew's first concussion, there were very little resources for us. So it was the internet, and that's not a good source of information. The second concussion Matthew had, because the Greater Toronto Hockey League had partnered with Holland Bloorview, and we had resources to go to. We weren't grabbing everything off the internet, trying to find what made sense to us and place it on our kid. We were informed. We knew symptoms. We knew that it was going to be different, that things can come and go, that symptoms don't even show up right away, that they can show up a couple days later. So the big difference for us was having the care. So, I mean, it really isn't acceptable for anybody to have to deal with this on their own, using the internet as their source of information. I like what Ash had to say about research, because there are a lot of great research studies going on right now for youth in sports and trying to pull it together. And I think that that's something that should continue. So, and then that whole component of mental health, because that was something that even on Matthew's second concussion we didn't get into, but there is a whole element that the person does feel trapped. They lose all their support network, and that is definitely the mental health component of it is very key as well.
Thank you. I believe Mr. Kitchen has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Matthew, I'm impressed as heck out of you for a 13-year-old boy to be as confident and open as you are, and thank you very much for being here, and you impressed me tremendously. So my question to you is, we talked a little bit about respect for sport, and I think, my thought is, okay, so we've done a lot of things in hockey where we've put in trainers, which we never used to have, and then we now, before the season starts, we actually have a meeting with all the parents, and it's again teaching them about respect for sport and in that aspect. But what about the kids? What about the players? If I, as an adult, went to a team full of 13-year-old boys, or even let's say 10-year-old boys, and said, or girls for that matter, and said, "This is what you got to do: respect the sport, respect your opponent," and I'll walk out of that room and they'll have forgotten it the moment I left. With having someone like you, would it be beneficial to have someone, an ambassador similar to you around the country that went in to speak to these young hockey players so that they can understand the need for that respect for the game?
Well, I think it does help when it's one of your peers who kind of pushes the message. So I think someone who was their own age talking about how it's important to respect your sport would be beneficial for them, because then they'd understand more and they'd see that someone is with their own age would be talking about that. So I think that's a really great idea to have someone like that go in and talk to people.
Well, I'd be happy to tag team with you and do that.
Thank you, Matthew. And our last question to conclude will be from Dr. Olfson.
All right, thank you. Now, Ash, I believe it was you that mentioned that there was a protocol. That you said there was a concussion protocol when you were injured. Was that right? Yeah. So it was. They describe what they had done, what their protocol was at the time of that injury. What did they look for, and what was their decision based on that?
Yeah. So so this was with the first concussion that we followed. The protocol was it was strict rest until symptoms went away, and then you start a gradual return to sport activity. So the first step was, I believe it was walking for half an hour. The second step was walking for 2 minutes, running for 1 minute. Step 3 was wind sprints for 15 minutes, which was fun. Step 4 was return to sport without physical contact. And then step 5 was full return to sport. And then if you have a symptom provoke at any of the steps, then you have to stop, wait 24 hours, and then start at step 1 again.
Okay, thank you, and it's very useful because we know they're out there, and we've heard reports there's various levels of compliance with that. Matthew or Kathy, do you know that at the time that you were playing whether there was an organized protocol that the teams followed in case of concussion?
Yes, and that's something that the partnership with Holland Bloor Review and the GTHL had worked through. So it was certainly educating parents, kids, and coaches about what to look for. If you had even one symptom, then and that when in doubt, sit it out. And then you work with your family physician to have a referral to Holland Bloor Review. They work with you on understanding what your symptoms may or not be, and then what you can do to improve upon that. From there, you would get baseline tested once you were feeling much better, and you could get signed back to return. And if not, they have a residual concussion symptom program, and you could get stuff from the internet. You didn't always just have not the internet, online is what I meant, sorry. So that if you didn't have to go, because a lot of kids would feel, I know Matthew did, he couldn't ride in the car and going for appointments was very difficult, so they were very accommodating that way. And then working with the coach and the resources at the hospital, they would get the person to return to all the things they like to do, whether it be school, sport, or just their daily living activities.
Okay, thank you. And Carter and Ann, could you add to that? Was there at the time of the injuries, did the team have an organized concussion protocol, and was it followed?
Yeah, in both leagues they did, but Carter will be able to speak a lot better on what the protocol was.
Yes, in the WHL, they basically would keep me away from everything until I started to feel better. Then they'd slowly reintroduce me to different things. But as far as when the concussion was sustained, a lot of the time there was just never in doubt that I was done for the game or for however long after.
All right, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, and thank you to all our witnesses. Just on behalf of this subcommittee on sport-related concussions, we just want to you have been excellent witnesses. Your testimonies, your answers. This has been all put on the record. I know there's been overwhelming interest and support in this committee and what we are able to do here in terms of being able to make our playing fields that much safer. And on that, I know that many of you have talked about just the network, the journey that you've gone through, and many of the stakeholders that you've been able to work with. Many of them may be watching now, and those that are viewing our hearings, they can go to www.ourcommons.ca/committees/en/SCSC and make a submission up to 2,500 words. So that is an opportunity for many of those that will not have the opportunity to be here in front of us as witnesses to be able to provide their submissions and their recommendations to this committee. So just again, on behalf of the committee, thank you to all the witnesses for sharing your very personal and compelling stories. Thank you. And that concludes our hearing.